going to learn a lot from Arthur tonight, and this is meant to be interactive. Arthur has created a slide deck of his exploits on the Mississippi River, and there's much to be learned, and look forward to his discussion tonight. In addition, Arthur is a very, very accomplished. He's lived and sailed lifelong in Lake City. He's an engineer in his first career. He's an educator and high school teacher. Arthur, in your second career, there was a master's in there somewhere. And he also is a very accomplished pilot and has his own plane, and is the oldest accomplished flight instructor in the United States, is what he told me. Did I get that right, Arthur? Actively teaching, and so he is very knowledgeable in weather, wind and weather conditions and maps and charts. So he brings that also to the table tonight. So welcome, Arthur. I hope I did you some justice. We're going to hear about your exploits on your boat, the Challenger 35 Ketch. If you want to share your slides, that'd be great.
Here, this window, and let's see, where slideshow. There we go. Did everyone see the slide? Trip down the Mississippi River in 2007?
Not yet.
No. You have to press share on the top.
I thought I pressed that, so let's go back and take another look. Let's see, Tina's here.
You can. I find it often best to share the file itself. You might have the choice to share and then find where the file is located on your computer, and that should give us a nice view of just the slides, not the notes or the entire deck, if you're able.
I clicked share content from camera. Oh, browse my computer.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. That sounds like that might work. All right. Let's see if I get to the desktop. That's interesting.
What's it telling you, Arthur?
It's just giving me a blank screen right there. Do you see anything from my screen yet?
Not yet.
No. If you want to email them, I can share my screen and we can do it that way, and I can advance the slides for you too.
Yeah, you can. In fact, I do this a lot. So why don't you send that file to me, Arthur? I just put my email in the chat.
Okay, hold on. It might come up here yet. It's just,
yeah, it can take some time.
Not what share. If I put an asterisk in here, maybe that'll do it.
How big is the file?
There we go. I think we're getting there. The screen came up blank and then it didn't want to do anything. Okay, I hit that. Have you seen anything yet?
Not yet.
That's interesting, because I hit the file and it didn't do anything on the share.
Yeah, the share, browse, find the file, and then usually like there's an open button.
Yeah, that's what I thought I went through, but obviously that didn't work. Let's close that out.
Right.
Come back to here. Come back to share. There we go. And share content. Do I have to click anything on that one?
Yeah, find that file if you can. Browse that. Maybe browse computer.
The window.
Yeah, I've got a file up that says no files available. So if I click on browse my computer, that should work.
Yep, click on that, and then you'll find the file where it is located on your computer.
Okay. And down in the file name box, I'm putting an asterisk in there because it won't show anything otherwise. So I open that, and there's my file right there. I picked it, and now I'm going to click open.
Sure, but I'm confused about the adding the asterisks. That's
Well, it
never
wouldn't
knew
show
that.
me anything that's in there, so I added that, and then it shows all the files that are in the Lake City Yacht Club folder that I have.
Is it a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, it's a
PowerPoint file
PowerPoint.
type?
Yep. But
Be-
now it's not there. When I hit that, it didn't do anything. It's
You should
probably
before doing that, try that again one more time. After this doesn't work, you can just email it to me, Arthur.
okay.
Go to share again, and then
on
go to
share.
browse,
Yep,
and then
browse.
don't do the asterisks, but there might be a drop down for select file type. Choose the file type. Maybe it's the same thing that you were getting at.
So when I get to the Lake City Yacht Club, it doesn't show anything. If I look at, oh, let's see, over on the right, there's a bunch of stuff. All files. How about that one?
All files.
Okay, I've done that. Now I see the PowerPoint there.
Yep. Click once on it.
Click once on it and then hit open, right?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happens.
Okay. Go ahead and queue up an email, and then do you see that I put my email in the chat?
Okay, I got to go look at chat and find it.
Yeah, up at the top there should be a top of the Teams window.
Yep, I got it.
Yep. So copy that email address and then just send the file over to me.
It's strange it would behave in that way.
Technology.
Yeah, I know. Well aware it doesn't always work right. Okay, the file you're attaching is bigger than the server allows. Try putting it in a Dropbox, I guess, or something. Can't
Yeah.
email it.
How about this
Send it
then?
in the Dropbox.
How about this, Arthur? So let's share it again, but this time just go to share, but don't choose a file. There should be an option to like share your screen.
Ah, I didn't see that. Gotcha. That makes sense.
Click on
Yeah.
share. Yeah, try share. I tried to do it the slightly fancy way.
Okay. So I'm going to click on share again.
Yeah, describe to me what comes up.
I get a share content, presenter mode, add background, screen, windows, content from camera, Excel live, no files available, and browse OneDrive
Go
and
ahead.
browse my computer.
You just have one computer screen going?
Yep, just one.
Go ahead. Let's see. Why don't you just choose?
What if I content only on the presenter mode? What's that mean?
I think that's a good idea. Give that a go.
All right, content only. I just clicked it. Nothing changed on my screen.
Open up the PowerPoint.
Okay. PowerPoint's now open.
Now share.
Now
Share
try
screen.
resharing.
I'll try resharing. Okay.
Press
Yeah.
share
Okay.
again.
Share again.
I got to go find the file now. Where the heck did it disappear to? I'll do this. That should do it. Now hit share. Hit share again. Okay, that's what I had before I had it open. There's share again.
Just share. I would just share your screen. There's an option for screen. Just try that.
Yeah, allowed to share screen.
I'm looking for those words. I don't see it. Windows 11. Or screen. Okay, I see.
There
All
you
right.
go. Something.
All right.
Yeah,
Got
there you
it.
go. Yep,
Have
that's
we
it.
got it?
Yep.
That's what I
Reading it.
wasn't clicking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
There
there
you
you go.
go.
Perfect.
You got it
100%.
now?
You've got it 100%.
We
Okay.
can
Yeah.
see it now.
Question? You can
Looks
see it
great,
now.
Arthur. Looks
Okay,
great.
trip down the Mississippi River 2007. So the key is lots of planning, and lots of folks don't understand that. Planning, planning, planning. Okay. Share my screen. Whoops. What do I got to click to get it to go? Page down didn't work. Usually,
I
there we
use
go.
the right and left buttons.
Right and left. Okay, I'll try that. So anyway, here's some background on me, the guy. I graduated from the State School of Science, Waupun, North Dakota, in electronic communications back in 1961. Army veteran with service in Korea. I worked IBM maintenance, that was fixing things, teaching worldwide support. I wrote maintenance software, tested maintenance packages, and reviewed maintenance packages and software. Sailed to the Florida Keys and returned in a Catalina 27 sailboat from Lake City in 1994. Graduated from Monona State in 2000 with a degree in physics. I taught high school physics and chemistry at Pepin area schools, so I used to sail from Lake City Marina over to Pepin, and I had a deal over there so I could take a slip during the week because they weren't renting them out during the week. Taught high school physics and chemistry at Pepin area schools. Oh, I see, 2001, 2006, sorry about that. And then I got a master's in physics from teaching in Wisconsin at River Falls. And then I went cruising for 9 years in the Challenger 35 catch. We left from Lake City and we did the route that somebody said, you can't do that. And I went down the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico, where we cruised the Caribbean, both sides. So that includes Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and then the Eastern Caribbean islands, Bahamas, and the East Coast of the U.S. Then I sailed back, which meant motoring on the river system, but not up the Mississippi River, up to Tenn back to Lake City in 2024. I've been on every lock on the upper Mississippi River at least twice, and 5 or more times on everything below Lake City. Airplane pilot for over 54 years with commercial instrument and certified flight instructor instruments, and Master Pilot Award back in 2018. That's for 50 years of safe flying. And what Marie was talking about, I'm a Guinness Book of Records holder as the oldest person to qualify as a flight instructor. And that was done in Cloquet in 14 March 2023. So if you're going to go down the river, you need charts. You need a cruising guide. That's Quimby's. It's a complete listing of the marinas and the locks on the inland and Gulf intercoastal waterways, which includes the Tenn. Information on locking through, all the basics of river boating, mileage chart, and maps of each river. And there's a lot of rivers that can be navigated in the U.S. I discovered that when I started planning for, my trips down the river. This is the route map. This is the one I got from Marie. If you can see my cursor, we started here, and this is the Mississippi River going down this way. It's basically each state, it's a different state on each side. So it's a state boundary until you get to Louisiana. Then it cuts across Louisiana to New Orleans, and then it comes out here at the South Pass. And we crossed over to Florida from there. So this is the upper Mississippi River here, and this is the lower Mississippi River here.
Can you
hit a
point?
pass. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you point on the map there and show us where you're?
Can
yeah,
you
great.
see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah, we can
Yes.
see your cursor, Arthur. Yep, great.
Yeah, that comes down the Mississippi River. This is the Ohio River going up this way, and I got a better chart that'll show that. But the head of passes is where the main stem of the Mississippi River branches off. So that's down in here. This is the head of passes up in that area. And so you've got an east pass, a west pass, and a south pass. When we went, the south pass was open. It was closed a few years later, and I'm not sure if it's open right now or not. And the the UMR, that's upper Mississippi River miles, that's 772.8. That's at Lake City to the Ohio. And the lower Mississippi River is 953 miles to head of passes. And then there's the other distances in there. So this is from Quimby's. This would be Lake City up here where my cursor is. And you come down here, that's where the Illinois River comes in from Lake Michigan in Chicago. And this is be St. Louis. So here's the Missouri River coming in. The last lock is about right here above the Missouri River. After that lock, there are no more pool structures, so it's a wild river. There's only 1 or 2 refueling stops from above St. Louis. There really isn't any in St. Louis. There's Hoppies. Oh, my cursor just quit. Nice. There it goes. Hoppies is along here somewhere. A spot you can get fuel. It's just a barge floating on the river tied to the shore. Kind of primitive, but it works. And this is the Ohio. So this is Cairo, Illinois here. We're going over to this side. This would be Cairo. This is the Ohio River going up, and this would be the Tenn-Tom Waterway coming down and coming out Mobile Bay. This would be the lower Mississippi River coming this way. You see my cursor? It's out here.
Yes.
Sir.
Tenn-Tom Waterway, that's the way the boaters go, including the loopers. A looper is someone that cruises on a boat. Most of them are power boaters. Very seldom will you have a sailboat pull that off. The reason is you'll have to take your mast down because you cannot go through the bridges in Chicago. They're all open, but the politics has got them all closed, so they don't open anymore. But you can go under them with a power boat. So they go down the Tenn-Tom. Usually they do the Gulf crossing along shore, so they'll do the ICW as far as they can go across Florida or go to the Keys, and then go up the East Coast. And you got a couple ways in there. If you come up through New York, you can get on the St. Lawrence and then do the lakes and get to Chicago and come back around again. We met a few loopers along the way. So the charts you're going to need are Upper Mississippi River charts. You purchase those from the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Lower Mississippi River charts. Now, these were paper charts back in the day. I'm not sure you can buy them anymore. Everything's going to ENC, which is electronic numerical computation. The buoys may be off station on all the Mississippi River charts. That's because the river is dynamic. The other rivers, when they show a buoy on the chart, it will be there. Don't count on it on the Mississippi River. They're mostly put off the wing dams. So above the Baton Rouge mile 235, that's on the lower Mississippi River. It's the Western River System of buoyage. That's slightly different. The markings are slightly different than the international one. So below that is the U.S. Standard Aids and Navigation System of buoyage, and that's basically the call regs, and you can purchase those from the U.S. Coast Guard, and they have both the inland and offshore collision regulations. If you're going to pull off something like this, you really need the call regs on board so you can have something to reference when you say, what does that mean? You've got something to look at. The sunset of NOA printed charts occurs, I think, in June or July of this year. After that, it's all ENCs. They're vector data sets that support all the types of marine navigation. Now, if you want a paper chart, there are businesses that will print them for you. But other than that, you're going to be using GPS and purchasing maps to run on your GPS or your smartphone or your iPad. And local notices to mariners, not a lot of folks know about that. Make sure you get on the distribution list, and that's the U.S. Coast Guard. I'm still on it, but I no longer get I stopped getting the ones for the Gulf and for the Eastern U.S. I get the ones for the inland rivers. So I can still see if there's something going on about bridge openings. Let's say you wanted to go to Stillwater and the railroad bridge is broke. That will show in the local notices to mariners, so you're not going to get it to raise.
Murray, you got a question?
Yeah, I have U.S. Coast Guard #1 for the markings. I keep that because I get confused with the international and the U.S. ones. You mentioned for the audience, I think if you could explain the wing dams and the peculiarness of the wing dams on the Mississippi River, because again, I haven't sailed down the Mississippi River very far, and
I've got a
what they
picture
mean.
later on. I got a picture later on if you can hold that question, Marie.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Yeah,
All right.
I have the call regs. I get the email from the call regs. I stopped getting them because there are too many of them. That's good to know. You can get the Upper Mississippi River ones, so we can keep an eye on what's going on.
Yep. Yeah, you can flood your inbox. This I got from Marie, but you can get it marinetraffic.com. This is Samana at anchor in Culebra, which is off the east side of Puerto Rico, the island there. So interesting stuff. This is Samana and moored in Lake City before we left. I had many diesel cans on deck. There's very few fueling options beyond Hoppies below St. Louis, and freshwater cans on deck also. I was set up for cruising and we departed October 16th, 2007. As you can see, the boat is full of stuff and we hadn't even put everything away yet. But when you're going to go cruising, that's normally what happens. You get away from the dock and then you got time to sort things. We had cooler days. We had color just about all the way down because fall was following us. And the upper Mississippi River has lots of wing dams. And that I'll briefly explain. I don't have a picture here yet, but I got one later on. The wing dam was put in many years ago. They floated some logs out and then they put rocks on the logs until it sunk. And then they do it again. So what you've got now, I think most of the logs have probably rotted away, is just these rocks. And they're along the shores. They stick out into the channel quite a ways. Usually there will be a buoy either off the wing dam, above it, or below it, but in the channel, not back behind the wing dam. If they're behind the wing dam, they went there because the river flooded and they got washed away when a tree hit them. So you really have to be careful about where the wing, if there's been current, nasty weather, they might be off station. But you can tell by the water, unless it's really flooded, of where the wing dam is. The key also is know your weather and how to interpret weather charts. I had a big advantage because I'm a pilot. I learned how to interpret charts, and you have time distance problems and fuel problems and all those things that carry over to sailing very easily. Computer logs. Here's Gene working on updating the log of food supplies because everything's stored and stuck away. So you got to know where it is. Now you got a computer, but how are you going to run it? You got 12 volts on the boat, so we had a DC to AC converter. That's direct current to AC, alternating current. So from that little box, then I could power my electronics. I kept an inventory of spare parts with their stored locations. Which seat did you put it under? Is it on port, starboard? Is it an aft? Is it forward? So you got the part. You put it on the boat, but you don't know where it is. So you need to keep an inventory and document where that stuff is. Now, back in 2007, Wi-Fi was mostly non-existent. If you wanted Wi-Fi or wanted to use your computer and check email, you needed to go find a shop someplace that had hookups for internet. And in 2025, you can use your cell phone and it will give you a hotspot for shipboard internet. Not everywhere on the river, because the river is not always next to the highways. So sometimes you don't get cell phone service on the river. But going to 10 Tom, you probably will. Most of that is close to roads, close to cities, and it pretty much works all the time. That's St. Louis, Missouri. The Arch chain of rocks is the last lock on the Mississippi River above St. Louis. It's quiet water. You cannot go down the Mississippi. There's this big billboard sign that says all boats must exit here. And the reason is there's rocks in the river and kind of almost like rapids. So you have to go on the Chain of Rocks Canal. Then there's no more locks all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. You can go, that's it. That's the end of the locks. There are some side locks if you go off the river and up some tributaries, but nothing on the river itself. And past the Ohio River, we saw current of greater than 6 to 7 knots at some of the river bends. Now think about that. You got a sailboat that does 5 knots, right? Or maybe 6. You can never bring it back up the Mississippi River from New Orleans. So if you're going to go down the river, you go to 10 Tom, turn left at Cairo on the Ohio River, and you go up the Ohio River to get to the 10-ton. Now, here's the picture I was talking about, Marie. See the water back there behind the buoy? That's a wing dam.
Yes.
It tells you it's there unless the water's really high. So most of the buoys on the river are located near wing dams. There's current flowing over the wing dam, and we found that a good place to anchor. You tuck in behind the wing dam, watch where the buoy is, and when you tuck in, be careful because it can shallow real quick sometimes. But when you're in there and you're anchoring overnight on the river, you know the barges aren't coming there. It's off channel. It's behind the wing dam. Unless he's out of control, which can happen, he's not coming there.
How
And then
deep
you-
is that across to drive across that to get across the wing dam to get to the?
Oh, don't
place to
cross the
anchor?
wing dam. That might be 2 feet deep in there or less.
Okay.
It takes out a lot of props on people that don't know what a wing dam is until they learn. Because they run their boat that way and now the prop's gone. I'm talking about power boats. Your keel will hit first on a sailboat. Also, check weather to ensure no thunderstorms are going to come overnight. You've anchored, you're in the current, so the boat is, if you're, let's say where my cursor is right here, you're anchored there. The current's going downriver because you can see it from the buoy here. There's no markings here, but over here you can see the markings from the river or the water that went past the buoy. So if you're in this section here where the cursor is, it's fine as long as there's no wind. You get some wind and it may swing you right around the anchor. The wind gets strong enough so it overpowers the boat with the current. So on those kind of nights, I would set 2 anchors and not off the bow, one off the stern and one off the bow. So you can't swing around and trip the anchor at all.
Arthur, did you describe how the wing dams are constructed yet?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I can go over it again. You want it?
No, that's all right. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's rocks. Today they're all rocks. There used to be logs and rocks. Back
And
in-
they're not
maintaining
fixed.
them?
They're not fixed with angle iron or anything like that.
No, to my knowledge, they were all built using logs and rocks. So they just
Okay.
put the logs out to float them, and then they loaded them with rocks until it sank. And then
Right.
they do it again. And that was done in the 1800s, and
Wow.
probably
And
early
that's to create a
1900s.
faster current. It's for the barges to create a faster current is the whole idea, so that
Yeah.
the boat can float down.
And so the idea was to help flush the center also, because that's where you had more current. And that worked up to a point. Most of the river boats, the steamers, are pretty shallow. Once the barges hit, the U.S. Corps of Engineers attempts, with a lot of dredging, to keep the main channel at 9 foot. So that's what the barges do. Every once in a while, they'll run aground in mid-channel, and of course, then the Coast Guard has to come and start dredging that area. This is the lower Mississippi River. Gene looks relaxed there. Now, remember all the diesel cans on deck? I idled all the way down the river so I wouldn't burn much diesel because of the lack of fuel. But if you idle, you get steerage. And if you got 2-3 knots of current and another couple knots of just idling, you're making good progress down the river. And if you notice there's a barge in the background. There's a lot of commercial traffic on the lower Mississippi River. We anchored a couple of days at Natchez, and we were having a drink at a local bar when the bartender says, "You have a phone call." He hands me this phone and says, "You got a phone call?" I says, "Who knows I'm here?" A local newspaper reporter had gone across the bridge, saw the sailboat, which was a novelty because you don't see sailboats down there. And so she came and interviewed us, and then we were on the front page the next day. Delta Queen at Natchez. And there's large tows on the lower Mississippi River. A tow can be as large as 6 by 7 or 42 barges. Those up here are 3 by 5, 15. 15 to 42 is a significant difference. So, and they sometimes take all the turn up when they have to do a river bend. So they're put together on the Ohio River, and then they enter the lower Mississippi River. And these tows are going to New Orleans for breakdown and unloading for international shipping. And they come back empty. Sometimes they'll be hauling supplies back too. And you need to be talking to the tow operators. It's a thing to think about. Any tow going downriver has the right of way over any tow coming upriver. The reason is you can have steerage when the current is coming into you, but trying to get steerage and go backwards doesn't work. You know how sailboats like to go backwards. Tows have the same problem. Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Nuclear power plant on the lower Mississippi River. And again, you can see a buoy here, green one. Could be a wing dam there, maybe not. That's New Orleans, industrial city. Freighter traffic, New Orleans. That's a ship on the Mississippi River. So approaching New Orleans, shipping comes up the river. You need to contact the captain of the port to ensure passage is clear. They were kind of wondering who I was when I called because I wasn't a ship. But it was just nice to know that things were going to be okay. There's a lot of international commerce. And so that's deep there. These ships have a lot of drafts. So the water is 60 to 70 foot deep. You're not going to be anchoring there. So once you get near that area, you got to plan your passage so that you can go through, unless you get off some ways to the side where there may be a marina. Again, now there's no wing dams here. The water's too deep. And of course, we were at anchor in Florida here. We had a birthday party for Jean. Time to relax on Jean's birthday. So, and another surprise, laundry on our trip down the Mississippi was about 6 weeks. You know how dirty the Mississippi River is, and you don't carry much water, so you're not going to wash any laundry. So Jean's niece in Florida, after we crossed the Gulf of Mexico from New Orleans to just below Tampa, Florida, washed her clothes and put a bow on it. We talked to her the other day, and she forgot she'd done that. It was pretty nice for us. So, really nice. That's navigation. That's me at the nav station on Samana. The radio above my hand, which is where the cursor is, that's a single sideband marine radio and an amateur radio station. So if you are an amateur radio, and it was really helpful because you could talk to people that way that were other amateurs, boaters. You need a boat license for your marine radio, and then I had the amateur radio license. So I needed both licenses on board the boat. Now, Samana is a documented boat, meaning it's registered with the U.S. Coast Guard, and that's the number. It's not registered in the state, and it doesn't need to be. Now, there's a few states around that will require you to register your boat if you are in that state and it's a documented boat. But in most cases, in Minnesota, that's not required.
Did you have
And then
AIS at the time, Arthur?
What's that?
Did you have AIS at the time?
No, did not have
All right.
AIS at that time.
Bradley has a question.
Yeah, I got a little bit more to say about that in a few minutes, but hold that thought.
Could
We
you
had a
talk
neat perb on board.
Yeah.
It's
Could
an
you talk
emergence- Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit more about the difference between the marine radio and amateur radio? So John Provost and I, we're both ham radio operators as well as my wife, but I don't know about John, but we don't have the marine radio license. So just curious about a little bit more about that.
They're different frequencies. They're not on the amateur radio bands. So they're on marine bands, and there's specific bands set up on single sideband for marine radios. As an example, there's also a set of bands set up for aircraft that traverse the Pacific and the Atlantic, so they can contact back to the US. The difference is that's probably not as important today with satellite communications, but they still have it. And a couple times I switched over their frequency just to listen to somebody. But you need a radio license, and the radio license is for the boat. And then you also need, and I didn't put that in here, you need an operator's license. So your amateur radio license is an operator license for amateur radio. It's not an operator license for marine radio. It's no test to take for the marine radio operator's license. You just need that. So you got to get that from the FCC. Just documentation is all it is. Where amateur radio, as you're well aware, you test for that. And I have, extra class, so that's a higher level test yet.
Very
Any
good.
other
Thanks. I
Yep.
got more homework to do now.
There's a lot of homework if you want to go cruising. I spent a lot
I
of
think
time.
people cruising around the world, some of them, I think Delos uses the single sideband as well.
Yep.
It's basically shortwave, right? And
Yeah.
so you can catch the weather, probably the weather briefings. What else can you get on the single sideband?
Well, okay, let's just talk a little bit about that. Weather, I got some of my Caribbean cruising when I was doing offshore passages of any distance. I contracted with, what's the guy's name? Forget, mental block right now. Anyway, there's companies out there and businesses that will provide you with weather documentation. Chris Parker, that was the name. Chris Parker. He basically works with cruisers, and he's got a radio station in Florida, and it covers. He will do the Atlantic, and he'll do the Caribbean. So you can get if you pay the right price with him, you'll get specific weather strictly for your boat and where you're going that day, which is kind of nice. Now with amateur radio,
He'll do the routing. He'll give you a route. Then he'll help you with your routing.
Well, you tell him the route you're taking, and then he'll give you the weather for your route. In other words, you're the one that's setting the route. He's not. He's giving you the weather. So if he knows you're going to be at some lat long in 2 days, he'll give you the weather for that block. And you also want to know the general picture. So if you understand weather maps and highs and lows, troughs and ridges, that kind of stuff, then you can begin to predict what the weather might do. And then he'll give you the wave heights and directions of wind and that kind of stuff, which is pretty important at times.
I gather there's a chart book for that for the world with all the isobars and prevailing winds. I've forgotten the name of it now, but I gather there's a book for that too.
Yes,
I've been told to get that one.
Trying to remember the name of that guy. He's no longer cruising, but he's from England, and he took the weather data over years and years, and that chart shows you different seasons of the year and different locations of the world. He says we could sell that. That's part of the fun of being on my boat right now. Memories. This was Fort Jefferson. 9 years of cruising was wonderful. It's in Tortugas National Park. In other words, the only way to get to Fort Jefferson is by boat or by air. And there's no landing field on Fort Jefferson. So you go with a float plane, they land on the sea, and then they take you ashore. So we came back to Lake City in 2016, purchased a home. Then we moved Samana back from Indiantown Marina in 2024. We did some cruising, wintertime cruising for a while, go down to Florida and take the boat over to the Bahamas and back. And the last time we did that was 2019 and 2020. That was COVID. And I was listening to the news and I said, we need to leave now. Gene says, why? I don't like what I hear on the news. And we left, and 2 weeks later, they locked down the Bahamas. Boats were not supposed to leave or come back. Enter or leave. So that was the COVID years. So we got back in Lake City, and I'm now in slip 728. In fact, my boat might go in the water tomorrow. It looks a little rough. It needs a little work. It was pretty hard on it. We went down, we would spend, 3-4 weeks on it, and it's hard to fix a boat when you want to be on vacation. Any other questions? It's awful quiet. Did I lose everybody?
No, I have more questions. Was this your last slide, or I don't want to?
Yeah, that's it. That's the last slide.
Okay, so I'll jump in with my selfish questions because I have a dream of taking my Tartan 31 down the Mississippi and then up the Illinois to get into the Great Lakes because I want to bring it up to Lake Superior that way. I'm just curious what you know about bridge heights.
You'll have to take the mast down. to get through.
You have to take it
Chicago.
down for Chicago, but is there any other points that you would have to
Not
take it down?
Not that I am aware of. Once you've got it into Lake Michigan, you're good.
Okay. And then when you took yours down, you were going down the Mississippi. Did you keep your mast up then the whole time?
Yeah, I've never taken my mast down for any of the trips. The 10 Tom has a height of about 52 feet at average water depth. So if it's flooded, you'll have less, and if it's drought, you'll have more. I have 47 foot because I'm a catch with two masts that drops the top of your mast quite a bit.
Okay.
And that was a big advantage. And if you're on the Mississippi River, you're going to open some bridges, mostly railroad bridges. But if it's an interstate bridge, it's like 200 foot in the air.
Yeah.
Because they're going across, if you think about the bottom of the Mississippi, the lower, it's probably 6 to 10 miles across in some places. That's the flatland. The river is, is less than that. But when the settlers came in, they built their cities right next to the river because they could, use boats and canoes or whatever else. And then spring come and this north country would dump all their water down and the snow melted and they'd all get flooded. So eventually all the towns went up on top, which is that's the reason there's no marinas on the river, as you get down on the lower Mississippi River.
So
It
one
just
more
floods too
question.
much.
One more question about bridges, and then I'll mute for someone else to jump in. When you were coming up to any bridge that was, let's just say close, close enough for you to be, aware of it, did you do any like pre-planning to see at the river level at what it was, or are there resources to know, like where you could look ahead and know what the river level was and what the clearance was going to be, or?
On the Mississippi, that's not a problem.
Okay.
It's not a problem on the Ohio. It's not a problem on the Tennessee River because you go up the Ohio and then you turn right at Paducah and go up the Tennessee River, and then you switch off onto the 10 Tom, and then there's bridges after that.
Okay. So if I needed a clearance of 45, you would say there's no reason to worry if I took the right route. Sorry,
Correct.
48.
You
Clearance
need
of 48. Yeah.
Yeah, you just can't get through Chicago because they won't open the bridges for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other good questions? They're all good questions.
Art, I have a question. This is Mac.
Yep.
This is a wonderful presentation. Could you give this, or could I show this sequence and your comments to the Sea Scouts?
Certainly, I can talk to the Sea Scouts if you're want me
Oh,
to do
they
that.
would love it. They would love it.
Yep,
I'll raise that in future. Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. Yep, I'm willing to do that, and that's not a problem.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions? Any question is okay.
It's Marie again. You talked about the radio licenses. For someone like me that wants to go doing some sea trips and, mid distance, what's the first radio license that I should get? How can you give us some idea about these different radio licenses and what I should be putting on my boat if I'm doing, let's just say I decide to go cruising around Florida, what kind of equipment for radio and that?
Cruising in the U.S., if you never go offshore and you just stay in the U.S., all you really need is the VHF. And the way it's set up, you don't even need a license for that. You need the license once you go international, which they may or may not check. I mean, I only got checked a couple times. Most of the time, they didn't care about that. But once you're an international, you go to Mexico or you go to the Bahamas, you need your international license. You need the license for the boat. It's a U.S. license, but it's good throughout the world. Does that answer your question?
It does. Some of the Irish yacht club people told me to get my my radio license. Now I understand why they're telling me that, because I never had to take a test in the US for the VHF.
Right.
It's part of standard sailing classes, but the international one seems like there's some kind of testing that I'm going to have to do.
From the US viewpoint, there is no testing for the marine single sideband radio.
You just need to get the license.
You just need the license, and you pay, I forget what, it's like $150, I think, for five or 10 years. I forget the exact number. And then it has to be renewed again. And you do that through the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. So FCC.com, and then you look for licenses, and you'll need I forget the term, an FNC number, but you get that as you start working through the system. It's one of the login requirements.
Great presentation, Arthur. I'm not sure if you saw in the chat, but I really liked your approach by keeping an inventory of things. It's very, very clever. I'm gonna try to incorporate that one of these days into my own boat. Having a look at what you've done here, you're obviously you're showing that you've got good seamanship, very, very prepared. I guess the question that I've thought about this trip myself, and as I look back on how I was thinking of it, I knew that there wasn't a lot of fuel stops, especially in one particular section. I would have used Navionics on my phone.
That would work.
Besides that, if I went half cocked and approached it that way, what would you anticipate would be some of my largest errors by that approach?
Well, I have an example that happened in Lake City here last fall. Somebody bought a houseboat and decided they're going to go down the river. So I don't know where they started from. I know where they ended. They're in the cities probably, but they anchored against the seawall, the outer seawall by the marina overnight on a lake. And the wind came up, probably from the east. It started to hold their boat. They pulled it into the lift and it sunk. So Jeff had to hire 2 cranes to come in there and clean out his lift. And what it tells me is they had no understanding of weather, no understanding of what wave action could be on a lake. You know, when you're on a river, it's pretty hard to get wave action unless it's coming right down the river, up or down the river. The worst wind would be going up the river. And the reason is the river water is flowing down and you got wind blowing against it. That'll make some steep waves on the river, which you wouldn't think about. But if you got current and you have that going, the same thing happens on any entrance to the floor, any entrance from sea. If you've got a wind coming into the entrance and the tide is running out, you've got dangerous water. People, you know, you're not going to go through that unless you got a boat with a real high bow on it and a big engine. So they didn't understand weather and they didn't understand what was going to happen when the wind picked up, and they lost their boat. And probably was fortunate. They lost it here where there was help rather than someplace on the river where there was no help. They probably lost their lives at that point. So my suggestion before you actually go down the river is go up to Stillwater. You got 2 bridges to open. You've got buoys, you know, you got narrow water, you got wider water. You'll have barge traffic, which you need to talk to if there's a bend in the river, and that's on 16 up here. And never meet a boat on the outside of the turn. If you think about it, he's got big screws and he's trying to bring his tow around. He's trying to turn it and he's pushing water to shore. And if you're in that water, you're going to go ashore too. It's going to wreck your boat. So I always want to be on the inside. Now, if it's a shallow turn, I a lot of times I'll call a tow operator and say, you know, do you want me on? Well, I say 1 whistle, 2 whistle. 1 whistle is port and 2 whistles is starboard. It's their terminology. We talk port and starboard. So if you say port and starboard, you'll say that's a newbie. And if you if you use the numbers, you know, this guy probably knows what he's talking about. Maybe they still don't know yet until they talk to you for a while. But they're concerned about you because they don't know what your knowledge level is.
You mentioned a stern. You also mentioned a stern anchor to prevent that swinging when you're close to shore anchoring. Did you have a trip line on that?
I didn't. You should have. I never did do the trip lines. What I do is let the bow out, and then come back down onto the stern anchor and raise it, and then come back up to the bow anchor.
So you got to have plenty of play, plenty of slack remaining in your bow anchor.
Bingo. You got that idea right. Yes, that's excellent. The real problem comes if you've got a side wind. Then it's pushing your boat to the side, and you know, it's really difficult to get either of the anchors up. So a couple times, I don't know if we just waited to the next day or whatever for wind to go down. But it can be a real challenge to bring up when you got them anchored that way, and there's a real strong side wind. It's pushing your boat sideways, so you really can't come down on the anchor the proper way. You should keep swinging out on the bow anchor. If you let it out, and it pushes you someplace. Now there's current, so the boat is fighting both the current and the wind. That can be a challenge.
What was the max? You did, yeah. What's the max current you saw on the river, and how long did the trip take down to the end? I forget.
It was about 6 weeks down the Mississippi. We hung out a couple times. We stopped in the river off Kentucky, and my daughter came and visited off a state park. And then we spent a few days in Natchez. In fact, we were kind of entertained there. Somebody with a nice big fancy car took us around town and actually gave us dinner one night. People get interested in what you're doing, and something they might think about doing, but you're actually doing it.
What was the max current you saw?
About 6 to 8 knots.
That's quick.
Maybe 9 on a curve.
That's quick. I mean, I mean, you could not have steerage, but for the engine, right? I mean,
right. Oh yeah, you better have your engine running. Yeah, like I said earlier, I had the engine idling all the way down the river, so I could conserve my fuel because I knew it could, and planned already kind of understood what my fuel consumption was going to be by testing the boat on Lake Pepin. So I had an idea for that. So that allowed us to have plenty of fuel on board. We had a little bit extra when we got to the bottom, which is what you want. You don't want to be using on the last part of your fuel when you're trying to go someplace.
Did you ever navigate at night, or did you always anchor?
Always anchored at night. It's too hard on the river to go at night. You need to be like the barges. You need that forward light so you could watch the day marks, and you need to understand the river. Your charts show you where the bends and things are at, but you've got to at night it's a different ball game than in the daytime. At sea, you're just out to sea, okay? But on the river, you got shores and buoys, and sometimes the buoys are missing, and you really need to be looking at stuff. So I did not travel at night.
Art, what was your biggest surprise on the trip?
Biggest surprise? Well, some tow operator says, there's a sailboat coming with two rusty masts, because they were painted maroon. He didn't understand what they were. I guess my biggest surprise was before I did that trip. I did, sailing on Lake Pepin. I anchored out. I was anchoring out when people weren't anchoring out here from the marina. And I would anchor out, and if it was going to be a thunderstorm that night, I would set 2 anchors off the bow. So depending on which way the wind would blow me. So I was testing all these things on the upper river here with short cruises. And that's what I would recommend, because you're going to find things that you plumb forgot about or you thought you knew, and now you're actually in a reasonable environment to try things, and there's help around here. Did that answer your question?
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
I probably made a lot of mistakes early on because pretty much of what I do is self-taught. That was with the Catalina before I got Samana.
So when you want to set a boat, when you want to set your boat up for anchoring at night, let's talk it through. You start in the morning, right? You're cruising down the river. You have your float plan for the day. You've picked where you think you're going to reach by dusk, and you're going to be putting your dinner on. Jean's going to be putting the dinner on. You're going to be looking then for a place to anchor. And do you just go by the charts? What else are you, talk me through that, where you're going to find, getting tired, we want to get the boat anchored, you know on the chart where it's going to be. Talk me through that.
What I would do is I would plan ahead for probably 2 different anchorages. Because the first one you hit may not be what you thought it was going to be. If you've never been there before, you don't know what you're going to find. So, and the other challenge you need to think about is the time of year. When you're doing it in the fall, the days are short. And up here in the North Country, it takes a long time for the sun to go down. That's not true as you get farther south. In 20 minutes, it can be dark. Think about Florida if you've ever spent a winter in Florida or just a few weeks in the wintertime. It's the same thing in the summertime. The sun just goes down because you're farther away from the poles. You know, if you're far enough from the pole, the sun doesn't go down at all, or it's down all the time, depending on how far north you went in the time of year. So you've got to keep track of that. So you want to be looking at something that's giving you sunset times. And then I like to plan at least an hour ahead of that so that the first anchorage, if it's no good, I can continue on down because I'm not coming back up the river for that one I went by. I'm going to have to pick another one. So if you have at least 2 picked out, then you have an option when you get to the first one and it doesn't look very good.
Was there any mooring balls in parks? Are there any areas that are protected where there's mooring balls?
Not on the Mississippi River or the Tenn-Tom. You're going to find mooring balls in Florida and along the East Coast off marinas or cities that have mooring balls, but not on the river system. I don't recall seeing a mooring ball anywhere. Now I know there's some up on the St. Croix, but I think those are private ones probably. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You still have
Do you have a
Samana,
water
right?
anchor?
Yeah, Samana's back in Lake City. It's slip 728.
Yeah, you're sailing it?
I plan to this summer. I blew my rotator cuff out in November, so I've been work I was going to do over the winter never happened, and I'm starting to get so I can move a little bit now. So I'm starting to do a few things.
I just realized I think I connected with you last year about a wind instrument. Let's connect afterwards, Arthur.
Yeah, I have a wind instrument, but I need to get it mounted.
Yeah.
I had, I didn't have a lot of instruments on the boat when I left, and some of them were pretty old. And then I re-outfitted with instruments when I was in the Florida Keys, got them all mounted. And then over the years, that was 20 years probably, some of the screens went blank. So on the way back, I didn't have much for instruments. It was a lot of, okay, I wonder how deep the water is here now, which I don't like because I like seeing all that stuff. So I'm now working on I've got the instruments, I just don't have them all installed yet. So yeah, things wear out on a boat. Especially, they don't wear out as bad here in Lake City because it's fresh water. When you're out to sea, you've got salt and you never get a chance to wash it off unless it rains. Corrosion is a big problem. You want your zincs and be checking them all the time. It's much easier here in freshwater. But yeah, salt water can wear things out real rapidly. And as you get farther south, it was interesting. I had the boat really nicely polished up with varnish on all the wood, you know, and there's more wood on there than you realize once you start varnishing it. We went down to Trinidad and Tobago, so we're on the Eastern Caribbean. I think within a month, everything was looking rough. The ultraviolet light just really did a number on the varnish, where it lasts longer up here in the North Country.
Is the catch-all it's cracked up to be in big seas with the smaller sail area per sail?
We did quite well. It has a higher bow than a lot of boats, and so it really doesn't slip water over the front. The bow just picks right up, unless you get in some really steep wave structures. But you know, it did well. It's the only boat in the marina with a wind generator, and wind generators are really not recommended in this part of the world because the wind doesn't blow when you're in cruising season. And in the Caribbean, I never worried about charging batteries because it worked really well.
I noticed your wind generator, if you go back to your slide, it's high up on the mast. It seems an unusual place. Can you talk about that?
I had that, let's see, right there. I had that specially made, this part right here. And it's a high quality wind generator. It's one, most of the people put on ones they've got to manage. And I didn't want anything like that. So I left it on all winter. So my batteries remain charged all winter. Every time the wind blew, it was charging batteries. And the thing you've got to watch for when you've got something like this on the boat, see those propeller blades? See these lines? You got to watch what you're doing. Don't let loose lines get out or you're going to wreck your device.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
How
So
about
you
your
gotta-
water supply on the river? When there was a point where you couldn't get more water, can you talk to me about that? How that worked out? You had water.
We carried 40 gallons on the boat, so it's really pretty shallow for that. And then I had cans on deck. Now here you see some water cans right here. So I always had freshwater cans. I carried four or 5 gallon cans on deck. That was your backup. And there's a multiple reason for having that backup. If you developed a leak and you lost your water inside, you wouldn't have any water at all. Now you're offshore, right? So you need drinking water. We just cooked with that water and would rinse something out. If we took a sea bath, you could rinse with some fresh water. And you know, if you weren't near anything for a while. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, it was very difficult to get water on the lower Mississippi River. We got some at Natchez, but it was difficult. I think we had to find somebody to turn the water on for us because they were just putting water on river boats. So you know that's not a garden hose output. That's a hydrant output. So yeah, you want to be self-sufficient as best you can and hope things don't break down that you need to fix. I always carried extra bilge pumps because if they fail, you know, you need to be getting rid of water that's coming in that you don't want. And so I always carried extra in my spare parts, along with lots of other spare parts.
And you ran the engine the whole time from time you turned on in the morning, headed down the river, and then
it ran every day on the river. Yes.
Did the engine ever fail? You had to do some proactive maintenance to get down that distance and running the engine the whole time?
We were anchored off an island in Belize, and I'm running the diesel to charge the batteries because I didn't have a wind generator at the time. And I heard this crash, and Gene's on deck, and I'm down below. I said, shut the diesel down. And we were a true sailboat after that because it broke the pulley that was running the belt to the alternator and the cooling pump. So the story here was then I became a true sailboat. And we sailed through a pass, and we went to, was it Belize City? We found a marina to go to anyway. And so I I anchored off and I took the dink in and talked to him because I had gas in the dink motor, and said, I'm going to be bringing a sailboat in to get something fixed. And so I said, which slip do you want me to come into? And they told me. I says, okay, I see you want me to anchor on that side. He says, I may end up across the slip and then I'll have to pull the boat back because we're coming in without a motor. So I sailed it into the slip or into the marina up a channel that had rocks on both sides, dropped the main before we hit that, just under the jib, and then started rolling the jib up. And I parked the boat in the slip, and they had like 8 people that are going to catch this out of control boat. So learn how to sail a boat. My point is learn how to sail the boat. You know, drop an anchor with a buoy on it floating out on Lake Pepin and learn how to hit that thing every time with your sailboat without a motor. That's skill building. I had done that skill building, so when this happened, it was a piece of cake. But we heard about that a long time after. Did you hear about that guy that brought that sailboat in with no motor? It was interesting. Stories abound, but build the skills. Because your motor may fail someday.
And you had a dinghy. You must have had a dinghy.
Yeah. The dink, this picture that you see here that was taken from the dink. I took it. Yeah, you need a support boat because there's a lot of times you can't get to shore. You're anchored out and then you use your dink to get ashore. When you got marinas, the dink is a lot of times in the way. It's a problem. Let me give you a suggestion. If you have a way of putting davits on the back so you can raise your dink up, that's a good thing. And then you've got to tie it so it can't flop around. But you really need a support boat. If you always can hit a marina, then you don't need a support boat because you got docks to go to. But if you're anchored out, notice the shore's a long ways away. And there's a lot of other boats anchored out here. There's some catamarans and a nice big sailboat here, and others in the distance. But that's not the river. That's in the Caribbean. Any other good questions?
Well, that was fantastic. I think there are no other questions at this time. I know Matt Baird is, as part of the Sea Scouts troop leaders, is going to be taking our Sea Scout crew on some trips on the river. So this is probably going to be really useful for them as for us and for the other members of the other clubs on the call tonight. And we thank you very much, and we hope to be able to publish this on our website so as others can refer to this.
Okay, so you want me to send you this particular, I can put it in the Dropbox because I added 1 or 2 slides since the last one I sent to you, Marie.
Great. John, did you manage to record it all?
I believe so. Yep. I just got to, it's a matter of retrieving it. So
I'm hoping you can come back and tell us about your cruises in